Welcome to the new season of the Power Hour. We're co-sponsoring this with The Matrix, which is a speaker series sponsored by the Department of Critical Theory and Social Justice at Occidental College. Also, the Gender, Women, and Sexuality Studies minor at Occidental College. I'm Dr. Caroline Heldman. I'm the executive director at the Representation Project. We are an intersectional gender justice organization. We make films. We run youth filmmaker programs, and we run campaigns, all with the goal of making gender stereotypes and norms go away. So we are in the business of changing the world, and that is why we are featuring change makers on this Power Hour series. I want to introduce my co-host and colleague, Sydney Corey. She is a film professional with experience working at organizations including the Representation Project, Film Independent, and A24. She is currently working in documentary development at Concordia Studio. And I'll mention that she ran an Oscar campaign and actually got a nomination. So yay, Sydney, I'll pass the baton to you.
Thank you. Thank you. If you haven't already seen Summer of Soul, I recommend you watch it. Shameless plug. But hi, everyone. Good to be here. Just an overview of the Power Hour. The Power Hour is a monthly interview series that features the extraordinary change makers like Caroline mentioned. And really the purpose of it is to inspire you to take action. So today we are joined by Miran Fader. Thank you so much for joining us. Miran is a staff writer for The Ringer. She is the author of Giannis, The Improbable Rise of an NBA MVP. She wrote The Bleacher Report from 2017 to 2020. Her work has been honored by the Pro Writers Basketball Association, the Associated Press Sports Editors, the U.S. Writers Basketball Association, the Football Writers Association of America, and the LA Press Club. She was named a top woman in media in the Up and Corner category in 2019, and her work has been featured in the Best American Sports Writing series. So welcome. That is an amazing background.
Having me.
Yeah, we're so excited. Kind of just piggybacking off of all of the great things that you've kind of accomplished. What made you decide to become a sports journalist? Can you kind of walk us through that journey?
Yeah, well, thank you again for having me. This is so cool. I love the work that you guys do. I never thought I was going to be a writer. That just never occurred to me growing up. I was a basketball player, loved basketball. Like I was that girl with a basketball on my hip from like elementary school to high school, like never went anywhere without it. And I played with the boys and I wanted to be in the WNBA. And I worked so hard for my basketball dream. I pushed it as far as it could go. I played my first year in college at Lewis and Clark before I transferred to Oxy. And I was just like, okay, what do I do with my life? Like, I don't know what to do. I want to stay in basketball somehow, but I don't know how. And naturally, as like my basketball life was ending, I realized that, this whole time I had been writing, but I didn't look at it as a career. It was just something that I loved and enjoyed and honestly needed to do to kind of cope with struggles from basketball. So like I was an avid journaler from 5th grade on. And so when I was in college and sort of leaving my basketball dream behind, I was like, maybe I should be a sports writer. Maybe if I write about basketball, I can stay in basketball. So what started out as something like, here's how I'm going to heal, here's my backup plan, turned into something that I actually ended up loving so much more than basketball. And then just realizing like, okay, maybe it's not even really about the basketball anymore. Maybe I just love writing, because I had to do random sports I knew nothing about, like water polo and lacrosse. And I had to buy lacrosse for dummies and get it together. And so anyways, this is my long-winded way of saying started as a basketball player. And it just, I don't know, it just inspired me to write about it.
So you're an athlete, Miran, and you are, you've had incredible success early on. I was going to say something about your age, but let's not. You are a New York Times bestselling author. You wrote this book. There's an interesting story behind it. So tell us about that story. And also, has the success gone to your head?
No, no. As we were discussing before I got here, today's a deadline day, and I'm just sitting there this morning, like, oh my God, like, how am I gonna write this? Writing is so hard. Like, it could never get to my head. In fact, it's the other way around. I'm more like, wow, I want to be such a great writer. I have more ambition and want to do so much more that I'm just like, okay, how am I going to get there? This book, it's been so many years in the making. I've always wanted to be an author. As I started becoming a sports writer, I was writing for different publications, but reading has always been my favorite hobby. I literally read like 70 books a year. I am a bookworm to the end. And I just was so inspired by a lot of the sports books that I read, like Jeff Pearlman is one of the authors. And I had this desire to write a book, but all the book agents were like, who are you? You are so young. I've never heard of you. And so from like age 20, I would say till 25, I would just kind of come up with book ideas and random book proposals, which, as you all know, is like a very laborious process. It's not just like, hey, I have an idea, listen to me. It's like coming up with a 50-page treatment, and being really serious about it. So I did a couple of those for ideas, and agents just weren't interested. And they were like, as the years wore on and my career started, going in the direction I wanted to, I was writing bigger stories for more prominent athletes. The agents were like, I like you, you're on the rise, but you're too young, or like, love the idea, but it won't sell. So I was getting such an education on like how book deals are made. It's not just a great human interest story. It has to be something they think can sell a lot of books, because that's their goal. So I was really frustrated, and I got introduced to this literary agent named Anthony at the beginning of what year? Now I've lost all track of 2019, I think. Yeah, 2019, before COVID. And I had just done a story on Giannis and his brothers for Bleacher Report. And it was a really impactful story, because I feel like at that time, people really only talked about Giannis in terms of his athleticism, and they called him, the Greek freak, and they would just talk about how physically gifted he was. But the story was more about what's inside his heart, inside his mind, and who he is as a human being. So Anthony was very open to this as an idea for a book, and he was like, this is the one. So that's how it started. And I had from March 2020 to March 2021 to do it, which is not the typical time frame for a book. It was only a year. So
Yeah, and you did it. And what was that process like? Can you tell us a bit more about that for folks who might want to follow in your footsteps?
yeah, I think it's very similar to writing features, but I would say like same language, different dialect. You're just working with so much more material, but it relies on all the same skills. You have to be a relentless reporter, interviewing everyone and anyone you can find that is close to the subject. So I ended up interviewing 221 people. If there was ever a time to be locked in my apartment during a global pandemic, it would be this one, when you have a project that you can't escape. So I would just work super early in the morning till at night on this. And you're just trying to piece together a life. You're trying to find out more about who somebody is as a person. So I think it taught me, all this time I wanted to be a great writer, but what it comes down to is trying to be a great reporter. You can't really write when you don't have any of the real bones of it. And so trying to find the bones is like, are you going to be relentless when you've called 10 people and you need to do the 11th one and you're over it, And so it was a year of that.
That's amazing. Do you have any, or while you were kind of working on that process, did you have any women role models that you pulled from that inspired your kind of work ethic?
I definitely do. Christina Tapper was my editor at Bleacher Report, and she's now one of my closest friends, because we no longer work together. But she, in my head, she's always my mentor, even though we're friends. It's weird that we have that now. But when she met me at Bleacher Report, she gave me a chance when nobody else really did. And she believed in me, and she gave me opportunities that just weren't available. I was laid off at those Register after 4 years, and nobody really wanted to hire me full time, and she got the job, and there was just so few women. And she really advocated for me and pressed for me and gave me opportunities, not just put in a good word. She sent me to Lithuania to do a story. So this woman has had my back, and my career would not be possible without her. So when I was really struggling with this book, because I had never done a book before, it was a really daunting task. I really didn't know how to do it. And even though like I said, it relies on similar principles, it's still a different dialect and it's still new. And I would think of all the lessons from Christina. And one of the ones she used to always tell me was trust your work. And it seems so simple, right? Like trust your work. But really, when I hear that from her, it just puts me in a different space, because all the chatter in your head, how do I do this? This lead isn't good enough. This story isn't good enough. This book is bad. All these things, if you just tell yourself like, trust your work, trust your work, trust your work, it just allows you to move forward in a really profound way. And I would just think of her words that whole time.
It's a great antidote to the imposter syndrome that so many
Oh my
people
God.
face, but especially women and women of color, right? This idea that somehow you fooled the world and that you can't really do this. So it's interesting. That's a great antidote to that.
I didn't realize imposter syndrome was it was such a thing, I guess, because we all don't talk about it. But then you start making other friends and you're like, oh my God, we all feel this way. And then it's like, oh, but how do you guys deal with it? So I think it's definitely, I've learned a lot about it, but I think trust your work. Even today, I was thinking the same thing, trust your work, trust your work. I think that's just always going to be a constant thing that all journalists need to think about.
Makes your work better, but also, I mean, just saying trust your work, I think can be applied to almost any domain, right? Any work.
Right.
Sydney, you have a question about sexism.
I do. Okay, so switching gears a little bit, what sexism have you witnessed or experienced in sports journalism, and how have you navigated that?
Yeah, I mean, I think being a woman in sports, first of all, it's just like you feel like it's just you. There's so few women. So just being in the locker room by yourself and it's just a group of men, you just already feel different and strange. Definitely experience a lot. It doesn't help that I am really short. So I'm 5 feet tall. So when you look at me, you don't think like imposing sports writer in a room full of really tall basketball millionaire men and, clusters of male sports journalists. So there's been times where like I've been in a locker room and people have like mistaken me for an intern. I've showed up to interviews with athletes and they're like, so where's the reporter? Just, I know that they look at me and they don't see me. And not all of them, but like it's definitely happened before. Like, and I've also had amazing, wonderful experiences and no sexism, but it does exist. It has happened. I think one of the major things is like sometimes there's just an assumption that like I don't know what I'm talking about, and there's a lot of like mansplaining, and they don't know me. They don't know that I gave my entire life to basketball, that I played from the time I was 10. Like basketball is like my heart and soul, but they have no idea that when they see me. And most of the male reporters that I'm around actually didn't even play, but the coaches would never assume that they don't know what they're talking about, So like, I remember, I was in this scrum before COVID. So I guess 2 years now. And I was just asking this like prominent college coach, I was like, what do you think about so-and-so's work ethic? And he was like, he has a really strong motor. Do you know what a motor is? And he was like mansplaining a motor. And here's the thing, like context clues, even if I somehow didn't, it's like not a hard concept, like I would have been able to get it, but obviously I know what that means in basketball. And like everyone's laughing and I'm just like, oh my God, I can't. So it's like little moments like that. Then there's also just like bigger moments, which have been really tough. There's a lot of handlers in this game, a lot of things that journalists face people don't realize. Like in order for you to get access to a subject to write about, you have to go through an agent or like a PR person or whatever to get access. And oftentimes that person's a man. And I've had just kind of some tough times of that power dynamic of them knowing that you essentially need them to do the story and them acting, kind of inappropriately towards me. So I've definitely dealt with that. Um, just in general, it's just the numbers are so low for women in sports, and just like actually getting jobs, and not just writers, but it's very low among editors. So I think it's weird. Like there's so much progress that's been made, but there's so much that needs to be done. So I've just kind of witnessed it firsthand, like if you look at opportunities, like who keeps rising and who doesn't, it's like very obvious. And it's just kind of a pattern that repeats. And I think because people now are able to identify certain women that they admire, whether they're like a print journalist or on TV, like, oh, I love that person. She's great. She's great. They think it's fine. Parity has been achieved. But, just because you can list like 5 people doesn't mean that that's enough or across the board in substantial numbers. So, yeah, I guess the last thing I want to say on that, I guess, is just a shout out to the Association for Women in Sports Media, awesome, as they call it, AWSM. Very cool organization, and they actually link young women sports writers and TV personalities to veterans in the field, and they're just really supportive. When I went to my first conference, I was so surprised. I was like, there's enough of us to fit in a room. Like, it was so weird. And I met one of my best friends there, and it was like, whoa, there's others. It's really cool.
Well, so the numbers are, you're right, no parity has been achieved, right? Women are 51% of the population, but 9% of bylines for sports articles. So a vast underrepresentation. We want to get more women in the door, and you said it's improved a lot in the past half a decade. If someone wants to follow in your footsteps, a woman wants to follow in your footsteps and go into sports journalism, what advice would you give her?
Oh man, email women that you see doing the work that you want to do. Oftentimes emails that you send to a potential mentor that are not specific, that are just like, hey, I want to pick your brain. It's very hard for the person on the other end to kind of like figure out how they can help you. But when you say like, hey, I want to be, like, if it's somebody reaching out to me, which, this is a thing that, I've met so many great young journalists this way. Hey, I want to be a long form writer. I really admire how you get a lot of sources in your pieces. I just want to ask a few questions on how to do that so I can help, myself and break in. That's the kind of, specific conversation that I think is a great starting point. Because if we're aware of who's coming up, we, those of us who do have jobs can try to help advocate for those who are coming up. So I think it's number one, just like reaching out to people you admire. The other thing is like read widely. I know this doesn't have anything to do with reporting, but I feel like all my years as a fiction reader and somebody that's read so much like outside of sports and was an English major and really learned how to write, because, Occidental, like where I went, we didn't really have a huge journalism program like a lot of the top journalism schools out there, like Northwestern or, Mizzou. But I had classes where we literally had to close read. And so I think that my attention to detail came from that. And so if you want to write and you want to be a journalist, like I think you should not just read, but like actively read. So when you're reading a feature by somebody you admire, print it out, underline turns of phrases that you like, write in the margins, like, why did that work? Or like, why was that image so powerful? Like, why did you feel so moved by that? What did you think of the structure? Like when you break it down like that and you start reading actively like that, it changes the way that you write. And I feel like that can help set you apart, because the editor is going to look at your work and say like, I'm not just reading an article about an athlete, I'm reading about a person and a life. So I think that's definitely one thing. And the other thing is just cold email, be aggressive. I reached out to over like 50 places upon graduation, just saying like, hi, I'd love to write. I write this, I do this, here are my clips. And I literally heard back from nobody or just like they'd respond and then they ghost, and then it would just be a no. And then the OC register was like the one response I got. So I just kind of professionally stalked them for a couple months and, squeaky wheel and, oh, can you read this? I just did this. I'd love to meet you here. And I got an interview, and that's how it happened. I think it's really hard if you just patrol the job boards, because a lot of times they don't post the jobs. So just kind of have the courage to just cold reach out and email literally anyone. You can look on Twitter, find the editor's name, say, hey, can I DM you? I have an idea. And then just DM him or her.
Increasingly her, not much, but increasingly.
I know there's some.
Well, that was amazing advice. Switching over, a little birdie told us that you're working on a new book. Can you tell us a bit about your latest project?
Yeah, I can't say who, but I'm really excited about this because and it's like in the works, I should say, not official, but hopefully nearly there. With Giannis, he lived an extraordinary life for somebody who was under 30. He literally had like 8 lives. That just doesn't happen too often. His story is so remarkable. But when you do a book, you usually want to do a book on somebody much older and somebody that's really lived. And I really wanted to do a book on a person that has retired from basketball and who has a different perspective looking back, because it's very different when you're in it. I was fortunate to capture Giannis at a really incredible point in his career where it was trying to capture greatness in real time, which is really hard to do because his legacy is not written yet. There's going to be a decade more of greatness to witness. But with this person for the second project, I'm so intrigued how differently this person thought of things now than when he was in his 20s. I think also it's just so hard with NBA PR. They used to say like NFL was the worst in terms of like giving access to reporters, but I really think NBA is like given a run for its money. And so I think I'm very excited to like not have to deal with current team PR and I also think the nerd in me that like we were just talking about with close reading just loves to do research. And so I think I'm so excited to like dig into the archives of a person's life. I was not born when this person was dominating. So I'm very excited. I kind of see books as the ultimate goal for me. I think I'm not ready to like give up writing features at the same time. So my hope is that, if I do get this opportunity and future book opportunities, that'll kind of set me up to like fully be able to focus on books one day. So I'm so excited.
And of course, we're all guessing. I'm like, okay, someone from the 70s. I think.
Like, how old is she?
Yeah. Doing the math. So folks, please put your questions in the Q&A. We just have a few more questions for Miriam, and then we want to make sure that you get an opportunity to ask her some questions. The Olympics are happening.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, we would be remiss if we didn't ask you what we should be watching for. What are you watching for? And are you writing anything along these lines?
So I'm not writing anything, but one person that I admire so much that I did write about before is Michaela Schifrin. And I don't know if you've all seen her, but she's a brutal time in this Olympics. And there's just like NBC just kept focusing on her, just crouched over with her, just clearly just so upset, so distressed. And obviously she didn't do the way she wanted to do. She's prepared her whole life for this moment. I profiled her in 2020, and it was like one of the darkest years of her life. And she was so in grief over the death of her father, and also feeling like, how can I become the athlete that I was? Like, she'd been trying to retrieve this lost identity and feeling like she wasn't performing her best. And getting to know her and her family and like watching her grow through that difficult time gave me tremendous respect for her, because it is so scary to do what they do. Anyone watching these Winter Olympics, just scared out of your freaking minds watching these people fly through the air and like risk their entire bodies, and how mentally like sound you have to be to take that risk. And I was thinking, I had so much empathy for her as I'm watching her struggle through this Olympics, because I know what she has been through. Like, that piece did not get a lot of attention because I think she's a woman, and Bleacher Report was primarily, most of our readers are men ages 18 to 32, but and they cater to that audience. But I just think she's such a role model in terms of how to deal with setbacks, how to be mentally strong, but also vulnerable. Like, she has opened herself up to the world and been really honest about her struggles in the way that other prominent women athletes have, like Naomi Osaka and Simone Biles. And I just really feel for her, but she's still competing. And so I think if you watch her, just know that, like, this person who the TV cameras are saying, wow, the most disappointing moment in her whole career, she's still a person, and she's actually carrying a lot on her back and in her mind and heart. And so, like, just think of her as you watch her in the coming days and maybe read that story.
Yeah, so much attention and focus, right, on her, on the negative aspects of her career, but she's still the best at what she does in the
She's a
world.
legend. Yeah. Nobody has done what she's done, but it's always like, oh, you disappointed, so that's it. So what, that cancels out your entire worth as a human being, as a woman, as an athlete. So she's a wonderful person. She's really great.
Switching over now to the Q&As from the audience. So Mary asks, how could women mentor one another more intentionally and intersectionally?
I think you have to be active in the sense of, you should not be waiting until a job is posted to recommend somebody. So it's like active reaching out, like, hey, I know this up and comer, she's amazing. Like, if you have any opportunities, please contact us. Like, she's ready, she's this, she's that. Like, being active about it. Like, don't wait for a moment, because then it's just kind of, oh, I made the call. It's not enough. You want to be reaching out constantly and actively putting people on other people's radars, because if you don't push, like, they don't feel an incentive to do anything. Like, they just want to repeat the status quo as it is. So I think it's just about, like, being more intentional about that. And number two, also, like, pairing your mentee with somebody that can better serve them and help them, that better understands what they're going through. Like, if you have a lot of women in this industry, introduce, like, there's literally room for all of us. And I think people tend to, because there's so few of us, there's so much, like, elbowing out of the way and, like, not being kind to each other. And so I think, like, just being kind and introducing and just opening up a seat, is really how to do it. And the other thing is just, like, being intersectional with the kind of work that you do. Which women are you focusing on? Which women are you giving a platform? A feature is a big deal. It's 4,000 words of a person's inner thoughts and hearts and minds. And, like, I do get to choose, like, 99% of the subjects I cover. Of course it has to get approved, and I can't just do whatever I want, but it's about you setting an example of having that kind of coverage, and also just also speaking up, not being afraid to speak up. Like, sometimes, like, mentees of mine say to me, like, well, I've been in a situation where I feel like I couldn't speak up, and they're not in the position of power to do so, and so it's trying to intervene on their behalf or give them a better strategy on how to deal with these things. I just think, like, when we don't talk about those awkward moments in the editing session, when there's misunderstandings, it just leaves the person feeling more isolated and more unsure how to navigate this in the future. So I think I guess the theme is just being really proactive.
Great. And to follow up on that, how do you practice intersectionality in your work? It sounds like you're very intentional about that.
I am really intentional about that. I think when I was first starting out, a lot of people were like, oh, you only cover women, as, like, a negative thing, which is, like, first of all, it was not true. I was also covering baseball. I was also doing male sports, but
Male sports, yes.
yeah. Not just sports, male ones. And I didn't see anything odd about it, because to me, I just think she's a badass athlete. Her story is amazing. Like, of course I want to cover her. I wasn't trying to be like intersectional. I just naturally think their stories are worthy and important and therefore deserving of coverage. It wasn't like an active thing. It's just the way I think, my worldview. And I had a choice. My editor was like, you should really stop writing about women. Like, you're not going to get to where you want to go if you do that. And it wasn't just women, obviously writing about a lot of women of color. And one of the first books that I got turned down for those profiles, not for those profiles, for the proposals, was about a team of Japanese American women basketball players. And I had spent 2 years with this team. It mattered so much to me to do right by their story. And every book publisher was like, who's going to buy this? And in my head, it was like, it was clear why they were saying that, but I get to choose to continue to keep pushing the stories. And so I did publish that story. Eventually it got like 10 rejections, not in a book, but in a long form story. And I was really proud of that story. And so even as I've gotten to the places that I did dream of, with Bleacher Report and The Ringer, I always pitch women, and I always pitch intersectional stories about women, because I mean, that's like, if you're writing about, like, my whole thing is writing about humans, right? And human interest stories. Like, how can you write about human beings without talking about identity? And how can you talk about identity without all the various forms of identity? To this day, I still receive hate mail for a story I did about a Black trans woman runner, this high schooler who was being banned from her. Like, there was a petition to get her to stop running in Connecticut. And it was one of the most important stories, ever, really, that I felt like I was doing. There was so much battle. Like, my editor and I were like going to the copy desk and saying, like, you have to capitalize B in Black, like so many different things that we went through to publish this story. And as soon as it was published, I got a glimpse of the vitriol that trans women of color face. And they're like, you're destroying Western civilization. This runner she should just, just awful things that they would say. And this was like a 17-year-old girl. But I am proud of that story, because that woman is amazing. And she is so determined to like do what she's passionate about in life. And so it was just really amazing to tell that story. So I don't know, I guess I don't want to stop. I don't know.
Right.
Why would I stop?
It's social justice, it's human interest. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Another question, very different track. Does being a woman have advantages in the sense that you are able to get more information than men might?
I've thought a lot about this, because so the person that holds the most, like the key to these male athletes that I'm writing about, is their mom. And there's just a special bond that I feel like I get when I'm interviewing their mothers, because they're just like, who is this? Because like I said, I'm 5 feet tall. And so it's like, it's a completely different person that shows up to their doorstep than they've had all their son's career, And so it's just a different energy. Like, it's not better. It's not, and I don't know if it's an advantage, but it's just a different energy. And I think that they, I don't know. I feel like I just love those. I love talking to athletes' mothers. And I think maybe being a woman does help. There are certain situations that, ironically, me being underestimated does give me an advantage. Like when I was in Lithuania and I had to sneak into the gym that they were playing at, because long story short, access was canceled that I thought I was going to be given. And there was only one gym in the whole town in this middle of nowhere, Lithuania. And so I just snuck in, because I was like, well, my plane ticket home is not for 3 weeks. I have to figure this out. So I was just sitting in the stands of this gym, and this, like, I don't know if he was like a security guard or police. It was just like somebody in authority was like, who are you? And I was straight up honest. I was like, I'm a reporter from America. Like, I write for Bleacher Report. I'm here to write about LaMelo Ball. And he was like, yeah, like, sure. And he let me stay because he doubted that I was a threat. And like, I got a front row seat because he essentially was like, I I doubt that you're a sports writer. Like you look like some random lady. And so, you know, it did work in that way. I also think like I'm maybe not being physically imposing in terms of my height makes athletes feel like they can open up to, I'm just, you know, but I don't know. I don't know.
I just love that moms love you.
I love
But,
the moms.
and you know, women are constantly underestimated. And
Yeah.
it feels like maybe sometimes it works to your advantage.
Right.
Another question from an anonymous attendee. There are many common myths about women in sports and sports writing. Which ones do you run into? What myths would you
That
like to bust?
that we are dating the players. I cringe. I just can't, like, oh my God, like I was on a podcast for my book and somebody asked me who I thought in the NBA was cute. And I almost lost my mind. I was like, what are you like? Why would you ever think that's appropriate? And I just, you know, it's so awkward. Like I was interviewing one player and we were at a restaurant because I don't know, he liked this restaurant and it was a good scene. And it was the restaurant was very like culturally relevant to the city that we were in. And somebody thought that we were dating. And I had to correct the person, this like fan that came by, and I was like, no, I'm a journalist. And yeah, it just bothers me so much because I'm a professional here to do a job. I am not here for anything else. Like I used to police my own attire because I was afraid that they would think that I was somehow like trying to do something. I don't know. I would just like wear turtlenecks and like never wear dresses, and I love dresses. And now I'm at a point where it's like I don't care anymore. Like I'm going to wear a dress. Obviously it's a professional dress, like blazer, all that. But you know, I definitely just think that there's this myth that people have about us, and it's just so not true, and it's so insulting.
Yeah, all of the above. And just to let you know, there's some connectivity issues here, but we will move on with some more questions. Horacio asks, when you face issues like hate mail or verbal attacks, Maren, does your employer support you, and how do you manage the negative criticism?
I think I've been a little unique on that end to where I don't receive a lot of those. I ignore them, the negative things I do get, but it's not to the point of like there are really some women in our industry who get horrible, terrible attacks, death threats, all like horrible things. I fortunately don't deal with those. But sadly, just from listening to those experiences of those other women, I find that they're not as supported. And I just don't know what to do about this. I think it's the age-old question, how does a woman exist on the internet? And I just don't know. I'm being so honest, I just don't know. And that's why I really don't tweet that much. I only tweet like, you know, random nerdy writing quotes, say something once a day. I'm like, okay, did my thing, not going to be on here. I'm out. And it's because I just don't like being in a space that thinks it's okay to do this. I hate it. I watch other people get attacked, and you could stand up for them all you want, and then you get attacked, and then you deal with like an army of people. So I don't know the answer to that.
And we're talking about it now, right? Which is different. So as someone who's been doing media for a number of years, I used to just think I was the only one, of course, you know, I'm the only one getting hate mail. And then realizing, oh, every woman who's public facing is receiving hate mail, maybe death threats, and then having a conversation where, yeah, we're not alone. And it's almost, I mean, I'm using humor at this point. It's humorous to me that you have that much time on your hands. Tell me that my hair looks terrible because I'm saying something you don't agree. I mean, it just really, get a life, folks. Not that easy to shrug off, of course. Becca has a question. Leah Thomas, the UPenn swimmer making waves recently for being trans, has been showing up in my timeline in conversations with friends and family members a lot lately. Maren, do you have any tips for talking to people about trans women in sports and the trans rights movement in sports?
That is such a good question. I believe his name is Chase, or actually, I don't know their pronouns. I'm sorry about that. Chase Strangio, ACLU, might be with the ACLU, not sure. This person is an expert, has covered a lot of cases involving trans people in sports. Definitely was commenting about the trans woman that I mentioned earlier, Andrea Yearwood. So I would look up that person's timeline and see. Andrea is still pretty active in terms of advocacy herself. I haven't seen anything on this new thing, but I would definitely check that out. I think Outsports is really good. It's a really good outlet that has good coverage. Katie Barnes is a wonderful journalist for ESPN, and they cover these issues. And as a non-binary person, Katie is really just done excellent work being at the forefront of this. And so I have not checked Katie's timeline to see if they've commented, but Katie would probably be the source for this. Yeah, those are the people that I would look to.
Excellent resources, Maren. Thank you. And we have one last question for you, which actually overlaps quite a bit with a question that's in the Q&A. Sydney.
Yeah. So last question is, if you had a magic wand, what one thing would you do to change the world to make gender justice a reality?
Oh my God.
You know, just that little question.
Oh my God. Oh God, that is so hard. Well, hiring the most Black women you can find across industries. You know, Christina Tapper, the woman I mentioned, is a Black woman, and just hearing her stories of all that she has gone through with that just really opened my eyes. You know, I think gender. The problem is like, if you hire one reporter, it's like, okay, but the people in the decision-making rooms, like the higher up people, like those need to be people of color and women of color. And so I think I would just hire as many women of color in those types of positions as possible, because they're making not just decisions on hiring, but how networks cover things, how who networks cover, like those type of big picture decisions are just to make a really, really small pool of white men. And so it has to get to that level, not just like the beat reporter for this team, which matters as well. But I'm just thinking like higher and higher in terms of hiring.
Okay, so that's my magic wand answer for most.
I need a magic.
Society is like, put women of color in charge. Thank you, Maren. This has been an incredible interview. Thank you so much for your time and for your work. And you know, let us know if you ever need help with the hate mail, but maybe the public will come out to support you.
Oh, I appreciate that so much. I feel the squad helping. This was so fun. Thank you both for having me.
Thank you.
Great. Take care, everyone. Have a great Thursday.
Bye.
Bye.